From the outside, she was everything she was supposed to be: the naval officer's daughter, the disciplined athlete, and the polished professional. But behind closed doors, she was snorting cocaine between classes, finishing bottles of wine alone, and spiraling into shame. This week on Sober Life Rocks, we talk about how addiction can actually become your most sacred invitation of your life and what it really takes to reclaim your power.
Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. You may have made the decision not to drink alcohol, or at the very least, not at work-related events. Whether you've never been a drinker, are in recovery, or made a health-related decision, we see you, and you are not alone. In today's world, networking, socializing, and celebrations often happen over drinks, and the struggle can be real. Through this podcast, we're changing that narrative. We're here to create a community where individuals like you, who choose not to drink or drink less, can find camaraderie, support, and practical advice.
Before we dive in, I want to take a quick moment to speak to you. If you've ever thought, I wish I could meet more people who just get it, who are walking this alcohol-free path and creating something amazing with it, then if that's you, Amplify Sober Voices is where you want to be. It's happening January 15th, 2026 in Orlando, and it's where sober speakers, coaches, podcasters, and creators are all coming together to share their ideas, collaborate, and grow their impact. Grab your ticket at amplifysobervoices.com. You'll thank yourself later. So, welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. Today's guest is someone whose words stopped me in my track. Lauren Fay is a writer, speaker, and coach who has just released a new book called Blurred Lines: From Self-Abandonment to Conscious Sobriety. Her story is raw, brave, and deeply spiritual, but what I love most is how she's reframing addiction as a soul crisis, not as a character flaw. Lauren, welcome. I'm so grateful to have you with us.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you for
Uh-huh.
having me here today.
Well, you're all that and more, and I've just loved getting to know you, and I'm super excited about getting to know you more right here. So I kind of want to start with what I said in the teaser. Like, from the outside, it looked like you had it all. You were the naval officer's daughter, the overachiever, the fit instructor. And I think a lot of high-performing professionals listening can relate to that performing mask. I certainly can.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, how did you get there? How did you become that person?
That's a great question. And the best way that I can describe it is, while my upbringing, right? This is not a pointing fingers, blaming, on parents type of show, but during my upbringing, it was a very strict military family. So just naturally, I was placed into a box with lines that I had to follow. And that was so opposite of how I was designed. And so how did I get there? It was just that mismatch between who I truly was and how I wanted to show up in the world to how I was expected to show up. And that, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, that's not a
Oh,
unique story. Yeah.
completely. I mean, mine wasn't military. Mine was just that my mom had this vision of who she wanted me to be. And
Yeah.
nothing I ever did measured up to that. And so I learned early on, like, to equate being lovable with my performance.
Mm, yes. Yes. I had this really deep belief that I couldn't make my dad proud. And he never gave me really a reason to believe that. I think it was just because every time I really acted authentically, again, it didn't fit in that box. And then I had to get pulled back in. So it was this feeling of doing something wrong when it felt like I was doing everything right, where it's the
Mhm.
innate way of living to the expected, constructed way of living.
I get that so much. That's a great way to put it. So,
Mhm.
where and when did alcohol and drugs begin to show up in your life?
They actually alcohol started to show up in high school. And in high school, I was an almost straight A student. I was a varsity athlete in multiple sports, a member of the community. So it was the double life happened right away. And the alcohol was not even just a way to fit in because I did that. As a military brat, we moved around a lot. So I really learned how to fit in new environments over and over and over again, the perpetual new girl. So it wasn't necessarily to fit in, but I felt like alcohol took off the mask and busted me out of that box and I was liberated, right? It gave me that freedom that I really wanted to feel. And I liked it. I liked it, right? So I think I actually made it a part of my identity early on because when I went to college, I went off the rocker. And again, that's not a unique story either, but to bust free from the home and the rules and the someone over your shoulder to complete autonomy, I made some crazy, decisions, and alcohol was a big part of the story. That eventually shifted to using alcohol to really silence the purposelessness. I went to college with a very, specific career in mind, and then I didn't follow through with it. So I kind of felt disappointed in myself. I once again felt like I was disappointing my parents. So then the alcohol shifted from fun to actually quieting that inner language that was,
The self-medication.
yeah, it was exactly a self-medication, and it continued to perpetuate as a self-medication. As we know, alcohol is a depressant. It'll just continue taking you down the more you do it. So years and years and years. And then on the last 2 years of my journey, I lived in the city of Seattle, where cocaine is as common as a party favor on a table as confetti. It's just there. And I started doing that, and that took me down really fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was the self-medicating with cocaine, or excuse me, with alcohol, bringing in the cocaine as something new and fun, and then realizing, it takes you high and it just drops you right on your face.
Yeah. Well, and so that kind of brings me to the opening line from your new book.
Mm-hmm.
Say, I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to be alive either. Like that hits hard.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take us back to that feeling, that moment, not to relieve the pain, but to help people understand like what was going on under all of that?
What really exasperated that pain was all of the secrets I was holding, where I just truly didn't let anyone know how low I really was. It's easy to blame it on external things. And it's like I had a big breakup, I had an arrest, I had this, that, and the other. But it really wasn't that. It was like the internal turmoil, and I just kept it all a secret. I didn't let people in and be a part of it with me to help me get out of it. And so that just exasperated and exasperated and exasperated. And I got to the point where I didn't know how I was going to get free from it. You blanketed under the stigma of, well, how do I tell someone I have a problem? How do I tell someone it's not even just, you know, how I feel about my not career or whatever, but that it's a problem with substances, what a stigma. And so my brain decided that not being alive was probably the only solution to that problem.
I remember, just to bring you back to a little bit of the first part of that sentence. I remember, I was going through a really, really nasty divorce, and I was raising my kids on my own, and I was working two jobs to be able to do that, and, getting this network of people around me to try to help with the kids, and drinking myself like crazy at night. And I remember one time I was at some family gathering, and my cousin, who I look up to so much, she's just like, "You're one of the strongest people I know. I don't know how you do it."
Mm.
And inside, I wanted to say, well, you have no idea the cost, the price that I am paying to be able to barely hang on with all of this.
Yeah. Hmm. Yes, I can relate to that a lot. It's to me, the way that I also perceive what you just shared is how much effort we put into image management and what we allow people to see. And so, yes, from the outside, you had it all together. And then self-medicating behind closed doors with the alcohol, which is exactly what I was doing. And so it's fair that maybe someone sees a strong woman or that someone
Yeah.
sees, because that's what we're showing them. But that
Desperately keeping that up there. Yeah.
desperately keeping up that facade. And then behind closed doors, when it just gets to be way too exhausting, is when
Mhm.
our guard drops and we use the alcohol, and then we get caught, what I like to say, in the enemy lines, behind enemy lines of our own mind.
Mhm. So I saw on I think it was Instagram, you were really, really open about the day that you were arrested, and you just brought that up.
Mm.
And I'd love to hear that story, but also, well, yeah, let me hear the story first.
The arrest story was quite an experience because that actually marked 1 year to my dad, like my rock bottom. So I was arrested and then I still had a full year to go down. The arrest was due to me being in a relationship with a man I was so head over heels in love with, but he was an alcoholic. And of course I was too, but I didn't admit that about myself. It was way easier to consider him to be the problem because with his alcoholic nature came rage. And it just got to this point where, I wanted to be in the relationship because I was so madly in love with him, but I needed to be out of it because it wasn't safe and there was this confliction and how am I ever going to get out of it? And then there was some psychological abuse. If you leave me, I'll kill myself. And I believed him, so I stayed. And then one night he raged. And so I just called the cops. I was like, you have got to go. And that felt like the bravest moment of my life because once again, image management, we were the golden couple. We ran a gym together we surfed together, moved to Seattle together. From the outside perspective, we were just this perfect couple. And that's exactly what my family thought. And there was love. Like I did love him, right? But we know it was kind of a sick, twisted love. So I called the cops and they took me away because that night
How'd
when
that
he was,
happen?
right, exactly. In Washington for domestic violence, the person who makes contact is the one that gets arrested. And that night he was raging, but he never touched me, but he broke through the bathroom door and I shoved him away. And he told the cops that. And I admitted, yes, I shoved him away. And so then I got arrested. And it was the most confusing experience of my life because I called them, but it was the best thing that could have happened because I got removed from the situation. And while I was gone, 2 nights in jail, he left town and I never saw him again. And which opened up a new can of worms of a heartbreak I could not process through. However, it ended the relationship that I didn't know how to end. So it was a crazy story. Of course, in hindsight, like I said, it worked out exactly how it was supposed to. But the police did exactly what they were supposed to do. They took away the person who made contact, and that was me.
Hmm. I've never shared this story on the podcast, but I too called the police on my ex-husband. He had come into my place of business and was just raging and trying to rip my daughter out of my arms to
Mm-hmm.
take her. So I called the police and they came and they said, I don't really see that there's anything here. He said, I want to make a citizen's arrest. In
Mm-hmm.
domestic violence cases in the state of California, which is where I was at the time, the police have to follow through with that.
Okay.
So I'm put in handcuffs and put into a car and taken downtown, and I was in jail probably about 7 hours
Wow.
before my attorney got me out. And at the end of the day, the prosecutor took one look at the whole case and threw it out. So
Yeah.
nothing ever happened, but it was humiliating and terrifying
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think
and
terrifying.
bewildering.
Yes, terrifying and bewildering. Perfect word choices. I was like, what are my parents going to think? What's going to happen? I was in jail for 2 nights because I got arrested over Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend. So the courts were closed. And so by the time I finally did get called down to court, I mean, it lasted 5 minutes. The judge took one look at my case and threw it out. And the lawyer that was assigned to me was like, yeah, he didn't press charges. And in my brain, I was like, if he had pressed charges, you know what I mean? It was just everything again worked out the way it was supposed to. But it was terrifying and bewildering. And then it was just done. It was just done. The biggest to most dramatic experience of my life to date then just was done. And that was such a weird place to be. It was this limbo that I did not have the tools to process through. So
Mm-hmm.
I used alcohol. Yeah.
And it took you down to a really, really dark place.
Hmm.
Can you talk about that?
It did. again, while it was, a twisted love, it was just, I was abandoned, right? He just left. He didn't even say goodbye. And that was absolutely, utterly heartbreaking for me. But on top of that, it put me in a very challenging financial situation. We were renting a luxury apartment in downtown Seattle with both of our paychecks going to the monthly rent. He left town, then all of a sudden it was my responsibility. And not only was it my responsibility, I still had a full year left on the lease because we
Mm,
signed an extended lease, to get a discount. So I was trapped in a city that I never wanted to be in. So the victim mentality was coming out real hot in an apartment I didn't want to be in a financial burden I couldn't handle. And it was just everything was seemingly going wrong for someone who didn't deserve that to happen to her. That was the story. And that's the story that I drank over. And that's also the story that I let my family see. So it made sense to them that they saw me depressed and sad and because I just got left and this, that, and the other. So what they saw was real and true, but I didn't let them see how lonely and dark it was, again, behind closed doors, plus
mhm.
just the quantity of alcohol I was drinking and the nature of how alcohol is designed. It did exactly what it was supposed to do, which was it depressed me even more. It took me down even more. So they just didn't realize how much I was actually medicating with alcohol.
And is that when the thoughts of suicide came in, or was that a different time?
The suicide came in a year later. And that
Mm,
was after dabbling in cocaine at that point for about 2 years, because I did start the cocaine with this ex-boyfriend. Once we moved to
mhm.
Seattle, again, it was just a party favor that we used. And then I started dating a drug dealer. So I had
Oh,
unlimited
perfect.
access. Yes.
Perfect.
I know it didn't cost me a dime from that point forward. It cost me a lot of other things. And so I
Mhm.
had access to more and more and more. Again, in hindsight, I can see now how much I was actually using. I don't think I realized how much I was using in the moment. So a year later, when I was at my lowest low, it was actually with cocaine that I was going to take my life. I was going to, hopefully, the plan was to stop my heart by using this drug. And it didn't work. And like so many other suicide survivors, the moment you take the action, there's regret. And so as soon as I was like, what am I doing? I don't want to die. The absolute flip of the switch was, I need to get help. And that's exactly what I did. I was in a treatment center only days later.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, thank you for sharing all of that vulnerable stuff because I think it's really important to understand what's come next for you.
Mm,
And I want to understand like how you use the phrase that addiction isn't the end, it's an invitation.
hmm
So, I want to talk to you about like those early days with what in the hell have I done to myself
hmm
to like how did you re-enter life and all of that.
The early days were very confusing, which I'm sure anyone who's getting sober
Mhm.
can say. But there was one thing that was absolutely certain, and that was I had decided I was going to be sober. So I was able to connect the dots that if I want to not be this miserable and this depressed and this unhappy, I have to get rid of the substances. I was able to articulate in my brain that I wouldn't get that freedom while still doing the substances. Of course, there's more work that has to be done, but that was the first immediate thing that had to go. So, as confusing as those first days are, because you don't know how, you don't know the how, I knew. I knew that it was my truth and that I was decided and that I had a rock solid why because I wanted to be alive. I mean, what more of a, better reason could I come up with than that? And so I had this burning desire to do whatever it took to get that freedom. And I
Mhm.
self-admitted myself to a treatment center, and I remember walking through the doors and truly believing I was walking into my freedom. I really truly believed that. So I was lit up. And of course there's the growing pains. There's the just the physical repercussions of so many years of addiction that we go through the first couple months. I wasn't immune to any of that. I went through all of it too. There was the future tripping and how my who am I if I don't drink alcohol? Red wine was my identity. So
Hmm.
I did have all of those experiences too, but the one thing that never changed was that I was decided that I was going to be sober. And this is where the competitive spirit, my collegiate athlete years and whatnot really came through strong.
And how long ago did you get sober?
Just over 7.5 years ago.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
So doing the math, so I feel as though there's been sort of a shift post COVID where people are more open about their alcohol choices.
Hmm.
But even before, like when you got sober, there was still somewhat of a stigma, right?
Oh, yes. Hmm.
And so how did you navigate that? Like, did you tell people? Did you not tell people? Like, what was that like?
It was a process. It was a process. The most uncomfortable people for me to tell was my family,
Mm,
military family. I felt like there was a big stigma, raised in the don't ask, don't tell time.
mhm,
So that was the hardest group to tell, even though there was no shortage of love and support. As far as telling the public, I actually became what I called sober out loud relatively quickly. I was encouraged, I was receiving Reiki energy healing, and I was encouraged from my Reiki master to use my voice, that it might help people. So pretty early on, I posted it on Instagram, and I basically have allowed people to be with me on the journey the whole way through. But there was that voice of hesitation, of fear, of, but what if I fail? What if I don't succeed at sobriety? Isn't it safer to not tell people just in case I fall flat on my face? And I had to work through that process. What shifted was that I was really tired of hiding. I was
mhm,
really tired of having secrets. And what if there was a graciousness and accountability that would actually help me stay sober? So I just really had to
mm.
shift my perspective on it. And I became sober out loud within the first month of my sobriety journey. Yeah.
Laura, my business partner, she did the same thing. She ended up using TikTok as her almost journaling of her journey,
Yep. Exactly.
which she said she was doing it first because she wanted to be able to go back and look at those days.
Mm.
But what she found was this supportiveness and this, me too, and I'm on the same journey with you, and keep going. And so I think that's really cool. It just was not my story. 20 years ago, we didn't have that. Plus, it was just, stigma was hardcore.
You just didn't talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, Lauren, early in our discussion, you talked about that alcohol really for you wasn't about, meeting new people in social situations, but more it was a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
So now here you are in the world. You probably still have this lease. You probably still have this business. Like all the things haven't changed, but
Hmm.
now you don't have your coping mechanism. So what
Well,
happened?
actually, what happened was my suicide attempt, my turning point, my absolute ultimate rock bottom was also at the end of that lease. And so when I checked myself into treatment, I was suddenly homeless. And a lot of choices had to be made. My drug dealer boyfriend wanted me to move in with him. That was obviously a hard no. Couldn't see how that was going to work. And my counselor at the treatment center suggested I go into a sober living house. And that was a hard no. Like every worst possible uh, judgment on it, stereotype on it, moved through my brain at rapid speed. And then I said yes. So I actually moved into a sober house. And in a way, because of that, my first year of sobriety was in a protective bubble. But I also I worked very, very hard at staying sober on my own terms, right? Not rely. In fact, I wanted out of that house so bad. I was living with 10 other women and the personalities were just through the roof, right? We clashed. So I wanted out of that. So I wasn't resting on that house as my saving grace, but it certainly helped. And so what tools did I use? Well, I was receiving Reiki energy healing before I got sober. So I was continuing to use it after I got sober. And I just really dove into my spirituality. I was, such a fangirl of Marianne Williamson and Debbie Ford and Wayne Dyer, even before sobriety. And I just leaned on those messages hard. And I was very, very lucky that the sponsor that I was required to have because I lived in a sober house was actually more of a life coach, and she was a student of A Course in Miracles. And I just was
Mm.
able to blast through, yes, into a new holistic, total body approach that was paired with traditional approach because those were the requirements set forth by my sober living house. So I did both worlds. Obviously, I steered more towards the holistic approach. That's what I do now for my career, right? But everything served its purpose. So to full circle, how did I manage without alcohol? It you really just you have to find other tools, and you have to be really willing to find other tools. And part of that is also the willingness to experience life on life's terms and all of the emotions and big feelings that come with it that are such a privilege in this human experience to be full spectrum like that, that we muted for so long with alcohol.
I shared your story of having been through a treatment program. And I remember one of the counselors early on said something that has stuck with me ever since. And I use this analogy in all different ways because I love gardening. She said, when you have a garden and you go out and you weed, pick all the weeds, if you then walk away and sun and water happens, what's going to happen?
Gonna grow.
The weeds grow back,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But she said, if you do all the weeding and then you plant new plants, it actually fills up the space and less
Mhm.
weeds can come through. Some still do, that's life, but
Yeah.
it fills up the space. And it was just such a beautiful analogy to me that if you choose the plants you put into the soil,
Yeah.
don't just leave it to chance where weeds are going to grow, then you
Yeah.
either get fragrant flowers or you get this beautiful bush or you get these vegetables. Like you get to choose.
Yes. Choice is my most favorite word. And choice is not only the foundation of my coaching business, it's the through line for the book that I wrote as well. The power of choice in reclaiming your power. Because when we eradicate those mistaken beliefs, when we eradicate the disserving behaviors and the old habits and the rituals that are not working in our favor, we create space. Exactly what you just said. And in that space lies a choice, and you get to choose what you want to put in that space. And that's the most powerful gift we have, that choice on what we want to put in that space. So I find that to be very, very liberating. Obviously, when we remove something that's such deeply ingrained in our identity, there's a mourning period, there's a grieving period, there's confusion. It feels like we've lost something.
Anger.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I had anger. There's all of that. And so we kind of can go into that, those negative thoughts. But if we switch it and say, oh my God, and now I have all this space, what do I want to do with it? That's so liberating. And so choice, I think, is the one word that if everyone were to just land that right into their heart, they could literally create, not to be cliche, but the life of their dreams, or the life that you really want to live that feels soul nourishing.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I remember when I was drinking being mystified
Mm,
how people had the wherewithal to do the things in life. Like,
yeah.
I know I'm really smart, I'm really accomplished, I'm really hardworking, but I just couldn't figure out all these things that people did.
Mm,
And then when I got sober, it was this astounding realization that, wow,
yeah.
I can make choices about things. Things don't just happen to me.
Yeah.
I was just the ultimate of like dealing with the self-inflicted crises all the time. And now I could make, and that was scary too, Lauren, because I didn't know
Oh,
what choices I wanted to make. I didn't know who I was. I'd
uh-huh.
been dabbling with alcohol and then drinking since I was 8.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Here I am saying it's the most liberating thing, but there's the
It
messy
was
middle.
terrifying.
It was terrifying. This is all coming from
Yeah.
hindsight and from the empowerment coaching side of me, but I do not gloss over that messy middle. In fact, I highlight it for multiple chapters in my book. In how are you supposed to live in this world? What are the right choices to make? I was always terrified of doing something wrong. So I had that moving through me, a lot of second guessing myself. And so the concept of trust, although it was a lesson I did not learn right away, was the ultimate lesson that was the catalyst for my sobriety and my healing, was learning to trust myself to make the right choices, and knowing that trial and error was okay. Obviously, my trial and error wasn't going to involve dabbling with alcohol again, but I have a perfectionism energy about me, and I wanted to do it perfectly, and that was so debilitating. And so that messy middle is really where so much beautiful growth and transformation happens.
Yeah, but while you're in it, man, it's just painful.
It's painful. And that's why we have support, right? That's why we don't do it alone. I, I can't um, emphasize that enough, truly, that it's not
Yeah,
meant to be done alone because of how uncomfortable that place really is.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this podcast is really all about helping other people see what living their sober choices out loud might look like.
Mm.
And so you talked about that, you started out right in the beginning with Instagram. But just in general, as you navigate the world, as you navigate, now you have a book, you have the sober business, but what is it like for you in the outside of the sober bubble
Hmm.
to be who you are and open about it with?
For me, it was really just reprioritizing what was important to me and realigning with my values. And so I dropped the label addict and alcoholic very quickly in my journey because I didn't want to be identified by the one thing I was trying to move beyond. I went and I surrounded myself with people who just didn't drink alcohol because they just didn't drink alcohol, which was new to me. I didn't know those people existed. Part
Right?
of that was like diving into a yoga practice and whatnot, where it was just alcohol was seen as low vibe, and then they didn't want to drink it. And I was like, oh my God, I've never heard this language before. So I guess I just went into the world and I stopped thinking about the alcohol. I stopped giving so much of my attention to the alcohol and just started giving my attention to other things that brought me joy or fulfillment or even just trying new things. So that's actually what I like to coach on the most is creating the life without it versus figuring out how to live your life without it. And then therefore it just completely drops away naturally and organically on its own because you just stop giving it any of your time.
Hmm, hmm.
Yeah.
And really, in today's world, there are so many people, as you said, who just choose not to drink for all kinds of reasons that have
Hmm.
nothing to do with recovery. That it really is a very exciting time
Yeah.
to be somebody who doesn't drink and not have quite the shame and stigma. But it's still there.
Yeah.
It's still out there.
Yeah, we are in new times. Times are changing. The NA movement is blowing up. I joke two different directions. One is thank God I did not have all these alcoholic options that we have now. All the little mixers and to-goes and when I was drinking, we had airplane bottles of cheap wine and shots, right?
Yeah.
So thank God I didn't have all these options like hard kombucha. Oh my gosh, that would have taken me down. But also, when I got sober, I didn't have all these NA options either. So now there's all these options. So the movement really is taking off. And I think people are starting to see it for what it is. I am not on an anti-alcohol campaign. I'm not out here to make it bad or evil, but we can't disregard the facts. And I do think that people are starting to see it as something that is poison to the body and that really doesn't help. And so people's yeah, perspectives and perceptions on alcohol are
Mhm.
changing. And when the collective binds together, we can move mountains. And that I feel like is exactly what we're experiencing right now. I was obviously still very, I was quite sober by the time COVID rolled around. So I didn't have that big alcohol COVID experience that a lot of people had, whether it was they went too far in or they totally gave it up. But I do think that that was a big turning point for our society when it was eyes
Mhm.
opened on either the abuse of it or that I'm actually totally fine without it.
Got it. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lauren, I have to ask you about your book because
Okay.
it's just come out, and
Hmm.
I know the process of writing a book is transformative.
Yeah.
Transformative. So talk to me about, first of all, why did you write this book, and what was the process like for you, and what are you hoping people will get from it?
It was, I like to call it a spiritual experience, to put it lightly, because it cracked me wide open. I thought I was
Mm,
writing the book for the readers, which I did. I also was clearly writing it for my own healing. So many dots started to click and revelations, hard conversations had to be had. all of my, still silent mistaken beliefs and insecurities and gremlins came to the surface. Like, what if I ruffle feathers? What if people don't like it? Do I have a thick enough skin for feedback? All of those things. And so I went through the trenches, but I also went through the most liberating experience of my life where I'm like, holy hell, my entire story is about secrets. And I have now published a book and I have no more secrets. Like, I literally have full circled my journey and concluded it by publishing this book. So that was exceptionally freeing for me, when I made that connection. In terms of what I hope, I started writing it as a coaching book, and then it just transformed into memoir. And I was kind of resistant at first. And I finally just surrendered and I was like, okay, this is the way the book wants to go. And so I followed her lead and it's full memoir. And my hope is to connect with readers through storytelling. And so while you might not have the exact experiences I had, or, it's obviously not going to be the same, maybe you can see yourself in the pages. And even if that's only a little bit, maybe you still just receive the transmission that at the end of the day, this book is carrying hope. It's carrying possibility. It's carrying opportunities for miracles, and it's carrying understanding and empathy, and it's carrying a whole ton of love. And that is my hope for the readers, that they feel that transmission when they read it.
I feel it with you here on this podcast. You just exude that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
It is very embodied, but I will be crystal clear. The human experience of writing a book showed all colors of me, the fear, the anger, um, the and I also had some very big life events happen while I was writing the book. So I was simultaneously grieving and processing, and it was a journey. Yeah.
We now know that when we remember something in vivid detail, our internal body and our brain doesn't know that it was happening in the past.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so going through and bringing all those up, and the speed at which we have to write things out and think about them, I mean, that just must have been really put you through the
Hmm.
ringer.
Yeah. The first half of the book is obviously the downward spiral where all the really not great stories happen. And I did have to put myself back into those experiences and
Mhm.
in order to write them. Because my brain knows what happened, but my reader doesn't know what happened. And so if I don't give enough details, they'll be lost. And so I really had to put myself back in it, and that was tough. I didn't feel re-traumatized. I honestly just felt sad that there were some, such cringeworthy stories as part of my experience. But I think that's the part of authorship that maybe is glossed over, is what it's really like to reopen things that you think you've closed the door on.
What's something that you learned about yourself that you didn't already know through this process?
That I love writing, although I might have already known that about myself. I love communicating through words. And that maybe that's what I learned about myself, is it was just crystal clear that this is the mission, that this is what I'm meant to do, is to communicate with spoken language, with written language, and to have the words be the transmission. I've always, when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a life coach. I wanted to be a motivational speaker. And I think the book solidified that my little girl dreams are absolutely the right path for me.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Thank
I
you for
love I
asking.
love discovering that inner child's passions and joys, and finding ways as an adult to live into those and lean into those.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, it is. It's
amazing.
it's pretty exciting. I'm excited for her. I'm excited for that little girl that's wanted this for so long.
So the last thing I wanted to touch on was something that actually kind of made me think about my own experience, which was, you talked about that addiction is the path to connection or an invitation to
Mm.
connection.
Hmm.
I got sober, and all that was available to me back then was AA, and so I dove in, and I really loved the process of building that community. I didn't have any community when I was drinking, and so building community and you know intentionally sharing things at a heart level and intentionally being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then my brother got sober 7 years later, and so he went through the same sort of process. And I remember at one point my dad said to me, he's like, kind of wish that I was addicted so I could go to these things, because you guys have these amazing communities and I'm watching you just grow so much. It
Yeah.
was so cute. But tell me about what your thoughts are around that whole, the gift of addiction. It really is what it is.
Yeah, the gift of addiction as a form of connection is, I guess, similar to the me too concept, where you can look at someone else and say, me too, I know exactly what you've been through, and let's go liberate ourselves together. I was also a member of AA, and that was the first time I ever said things out loud and was received with love and no judgment, that was a completely new experience to me. So I think that sometimes we want to hide our shameful stories or our shameful experiences, but I see them as a North Star for someone else. Like, our experience is going to shed light on a path for someone else to walk on. And that's the connection. It's like I followed the people that were before me, and the people are going to fall behind me are going to follow me, and that's the connection. So I have something I say all the time, which is together we rise. And as we know, the number
Mhm.
one desire of the human experience is to belong. And whether that's in the rooms of AA or in a yoga community or a book club, being with people where you share the same values and you have that transmission of energy is going to fulfill that human desire.
Yeah,
Mhm.
beautiful. Where can people find the book?
People can find the book on Amazon, or actually, people can find the book on the book website. Let's go there. blurredlinesbook.com. That will take you to Amazon, where you can buy either paperback or Kindle. blurredlinesbook.com.
I love that. I just want to thank you, Lauren, so much for, I
Mhm.
mean, just your vulnerability today
Thank
and
you.
sharing things that clearly you have processed enough to be able to speak about them, but they're topics that other people need to hear, and it just means so much. But you couple that with this softness and this warmth that
Thank you.
just makes you so relatable and so approachable. So thank you for bringing that today.
I really appreciate that reflection, and I'm going to reflect it back to you. The way that you were able to hold space for such big stories for both myself and the listeners is with the utmost amount of gratitude. So thank you for that.
Mm, absolutely.
Mhm.
So, as always, listeners, if this conversation resonated with you, if um, you had something that maybe was similar or felt similar, I hope that you will reach out and connect with Lauren at laurenfaycoaching.com. We'll have all of her contact information in the show notes, but also share this podcast with others who maybe need to a reminder that sobriety isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a rich and full and purposeful life that we get to choose what we put in it.
So good. Mm.
And for those of you who have listened this far and want to be part of this type of community of people who are living their sober life out loud, who are trying to make a difference in this space, please join us at Amplify Sober Voices, and it's amplifysobervoices.com. January 15th is coming up really soon, and we would love to have you there. So thanks for listening. Until next time, stay out loud, stay connected, and keep amplifying sober voices.
Mm.